through our families, parents, maybe grandparents, know nearly the entire history of the church as being a real part of that working and moving and sharing as God has blessed this community and this church. What is your story? That's what I keep coming back to. What about you? How do you relate to that? How do you relate to the church story here in this particular place? This church I've just mentioned is so beautiful here inside. It is so lovely to think about, and to think about all the people that's been involved in so many ways as it would relate to that. But the church is really not the building. The church is you. The church is the people. This building is beautiful on the inside. What is your story? How about you as a church? How beautiful are you on the inside? What's going on in your heart and in your life? What are you really thinking and sharing in relationship to this particular time? What about that experience? Your relationship as we relate to the church, as we relate to each other. How do you really feel down deep as it would relate to what goes on in a general way? I dare say that each one of us could improve along those lines, if we'll be honest. Everybody here don't really like the pastor all that well.
Hold on, man.
Let's just be honest with you. Everybody here don't like maybe your Sunday school teacher all that well. Everybody here don't like maybe a deacon or someone else in a real special way. But I say all of that to say, listen to me. Who is the loser under those circumstances? Who's the loser in those relationships? Who is the loser about this? Listen, none of us are perfect. The preacher may preach too long, he may preach too short, he may preach too loud, this and that, and on we go. But listen, if this is our attitude, if this is our relationship, if this is really who we are on the inside, then the question about your story is, how beautiful are you on the inside? Think about it. As I thought about this in my own heart, in my own life, what about our work? What about our finances? What about our giving? Your pastor talked a little bit about that a moment ago. You remember what Jesus said about that man that had worked so much and had so much and had so many goods he didn't know what to do, and finally just come to the place and say, I know exactly what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build greater, so I'll have a place to restore all my goods. Jesus said, you know what he said? He called that man a fool. What would he say about you? What would he say about me? Listen, what are you doing that will last through eternity? I read a story in fact, yesterday. And I thought about it because I've kind of seen it played out in different ways, maybe. But a man was planning to marry a girl. Her name was Nancy Hayes. This took place near, not too far from Bardstown, years ago. Years ago. And I thought about it in my mind with what I'm trying to say. And they had had a fuss a little bit that particular day. They had made up, and this other gentleman, he was kind of fell in love with that girl too, and he wanted her. And so they had made up and planned to be married, walking across the ridge that evening. And this one that was jealous of the situation, he hid. And when they came back later that afternoon, he took that girl's life. He had an axe, and he just really tore all to pieces, even severed her head from her body, threw her over a mountain. That man joined in with them to search for the killer. And this man that was to marry, they thought sure because of their fuss earlier that day that they hadn't made up, but they really had. And he had laid wait, and he took this girl's life as a result of that experience. That round bunch about like some that I've known really honestly. They rounded up that young man, put a rope around his neck, that was going to marry this girl. Hung him until his life was gone out. The man that really had been a part of all of this, he was in the search, trying to find the person that had done this and shared. And as a result of that, he moved out west and stayed for several years. And then he came back. And while he was back, he rode across that hill on a horse. And during that electrical rain, torrent, storm, he fell off the horse, hit his head, and finally got him to the doctor's office. They stretched him out on a mat on the floor. And that man called for the minister. Wanted the minister to come. They sent for him. He came. Never had they met. And the man said to him, I'm dying. And I want to make a confession to you, to the preacher. Do you think that will help me any when I get into the other world? So that man gave the testimony of what really happened that night. Because of his jealous rage, he hid behind a bush when they came back. He was the one that had killed the girl. They had hung the wrong way. I read that as I was thinking about this particular service. There's coming a time when you and I, each one of us, and maybe not too far away from many of us, those last hours, days, weeks in our lives, what is it that we maybe want to confess? What is it that we want to make right? I hear that all the time. You know, when we have disagreements, when we have fussing and fighting, so to speak, it's not your attitude that they were wrong that destroys you. It's your attitude of what that does to you inside. The Bible says that we are the temple of the Lord. I think about Abraham, later called Abraham. God found him in the midst of a lot of people that didn't know anything about him. Told him to get out of that place and go into the country where I'll show you. And he did. They went a piece, you recall, shared through that experience. He took one of his brothers, he took his father, his wife, family out of that situation as they traveled. He took a young man, his younger brother's son, by the name of Lot. And they went, and their herdsmen and those servants that was tending the herdsmen, they finally kind of fell out with each other. Abraham said, if this is true, let's divide up. Which place do you want to take? The lower plain or up the mountain? Lot chose down here, you recall. That's a beautiful story. You know, sitting there a period of time, there was a larger king in Chaldea that was over the 5 little cities, including Sodom and Gomorrah. And they decided they wasn't paying enough attention to them, so they had war against them. So the soldiers of Sodom came out and they had war together. They killed the soldiers of Sodom. What did they do? They took Lot and his family and all of his belongings. And they took them to a place that was later called Dan. And there they left. A runner got loose. He went to Abraham and told Abraham about what had happened. And what did Abraham do? He got all of his servants, all of his shepherds, all of his soldiers, all the people, and he went to rescue them. And that's exactly what he did. He went in the night. He ran off, left all their possessions. He found his nephew, Lot, and his family, and all their belongings, and they took them back. What happened? What happened? Lot went right back to Sodom. Are you listening to me? And then an angel came and visited Abraham about the destruction of Sodom. Oh, Abraham simply started out and said, if I can find 50 people, will you spare them? 45, will you spare them? 30, will you spare them? 10, will you spare them? Yes. And when he got there, he couldn't find 10. The Bible said finally, he got him with a hand. Lot and his wife, daughters, and literally just drug them out of the city, telling them not to look back. You know that story. Lot's wife looking back and the pillar of salt. Listen, I say all of that to say that's their journey. I shared a little bit about my journey. I keep coming back. What's your journey? Where are you at in that relationship? What's going on in your heart, in your mind? What about your attitude? You've heard me say that my mother always said to me, don't get in a fight. I was pretty high strung. She always said, if you get in a fight with somebody, you got to get out of where they are. I didn't understand that then, but I understand it today. Do you understand it? Somehow I believe that so many of us rob ourselves of so much joy,